Hello and welcome to this lesson on using message boxes to interact with a user. Now, it's not going to be the first time that we have used message boxes on this course, but so far we have just used them to simply display a message, such as to say a macro is complete or how many rows have been deleted, and this kind of information to the user. But now we want to interact with them. We want to ask them a question, and depending on their answer, take a different course of action. So what we're going to do is we have this inventory sheet example again open, and as things stand at the moment, what we do is we hit the button. It looks for all the products on this list, so it will look for 1008 mangoes, find it, add the level on top, update it. Then it will look for plantain. I'm not sure if I spelled that correctly or not. 1012. Find it and add it in at the bottom. What we're going to do is change it so that if it cannot find that product, it will ask the user, I can't find this ID. Would you like to add it? And then the person can choose yes to add it or no to kind of abort that. Because they may have made a typing mistake on the ID. That's the kind of idea here. They might have entered the wrong product. So it gives them an opportunity to say, no, I realise why you can't find it, or, oh yes, it's new. Okay, so let's get into our code. I'll just press the wrong keyboard shortcut. Would you believe? To open the Visual Basic Editor. Lesson number 30 something I think we're on. And I use Control F11 instead of Alt F11 there. Genius. Okay, let's scroll down to where this is all going to happen. So what I want is around the bottom here. Where are we? In here. In here we have the statement within our code that says, if the cell you're in is empty, you must be at the bottom. Therefore, add in all of the details as a new record. This is the bit that we would want to make conditional. And the condition is going to come from the user. Like their response is going to come from the user. So all we have to do here is write a message box to ask them a question. But the answer to that question will need to be stored in a variable so that we can then test it with an if statement. So let's go and set that variable up first of all. So back to the top now. A new variable which I'm going to call add new, and I'm going to use a data type of byte, because what we're going to do here is create a message box with some standard buttons that are already provided by the function. And I'm not absolutely sure off the top of my head, I think there's 9 different index numbers, but basically it's quite a small number, and we're going to be asked what buttons we want. OK, cancel, yes, no, abort, retry, stuff like this. And they've all got an index number associated with them. There are not more than 256, so byte is a safe one to go for. Now don't worry, we're not going to have to test using these index numbers. We don't have to say if it equals 4. We can use more appropriate words like VBOK, VBS. But technically there is an index number involved, which is why we use byte. And straight off the back of that, I'm going to initialize it with VB no. So I'm going to create one that is byte, and I'm going to immediately store it VB no in there, which I believe is index number 7, but please don't hold me for that, and neither is it really that important. Let's scroll down to the bottom. If you start remembering that, you are doing well. Let's get into this area we identified earlier and put add new equals MSG box. Now, so far in this course, when we do MSG box, I keep on putting space and then start writing our stuff in the message. This time, because we are to the right of an equal sign, because we are assigning this to something, this information to something, we will need the opening bracket. Technically, we are using an MSG box kind of method here, I believe, rather than a function. But basically, we're going to need the parentheses when otherwise it wasn't necessary for us to. Okay, the first question is a prompt. My prompt is going to be could not find ID. Then I'm going to close that and concatenate onto it item ID, which is the variable that has the ID that we have been searching for. Then I'm going to concatenate off that, continue with their text, could not find ID, that, full stop. Then what I'm going to do is I want to start a new line. Now I can't just press enter, it's even going to moan at me because I haven't put my closing bracket in there. What we're going to do to start a new line within a message box is after my speech marks there to finish off the full stop, I'm going to concatenate again, then I'm going to put a line VBCRLF. Now there are a few different ways we can start a new line within MSG boxes, which I'm not going to go into all of them now. You can look that up if you're interested. But you know, we can specify the number of bytes in width, and we can just put things like VBCR and so on and so forth. That little bit of text standing for Visual Basic carriage return line feed, if you were interested. But this is just something that's going to start a new line. It's kind of a line break, if you will. I want to concatenate onto the end of that. I could not find ID. Blah. Would. Actually, I need a space in. Oh no, I don't want a new line, aren't I? Would you like to add? Okay. I'm running out a little bit of room here. Let's put space underscore to start a new line. And we'll continue with our message box. Comma. Next question is, what buttons would you like in your message box? I'm going for VB, yes, no. Yes, I do want to add it. No, I don't. VB, yes, no. Comma. Would I like a title for my message box? Yes. That will say I don't know. Add new stock item. That's my my super title, and I'll leave it as that. So I'll put this closing bracket to finish that off. So what we've got here is a message box asking a question, seeing something we haven't done there, concatenating in this kind of line break, and then displaying some buttons. The most important thing of this to interact with the user. And I've also got a title, which I don't believe we've done as yet in this course. So add new at this point knows what the user has said. So what we're going to do now is test it. If add new equals VB yes, then the user has said they do want to add that stock item. So then add that, end if. So if anything apart from yes, it will just skip this part and do the keep searching equals false, which would mean they're exiting the loop, their interior loop. So I'm happy with that. It's only now going to add these if the user has said yes. So this block is conditional. Okay, I think we're alright. Shall we give this a try? So back into our window here. So plantain is new, mangoes, let's check what we've got. Mangoes is 50, so that should go to 70. Plantain at the bottom. If I say yes. Could not find ID 1012. Would you like to add? So you can see the line break there. There's us concatenating on that number. Quite fancy a space in there, to be honest, looking at that now. There's our title, add new stock item, and our yes, no buttons. So if I say yes, then the inventory sheet has been updated. Okay. And I can see that mango's on 70 and plantain is in. Let's put in some mangoes at 20 again. And let's put in something new. and I really am running out of fruit here. I don't know what to go for. I don't think raspberries is in the list. Battling through the berries here, and I'll have 30. Let's give that a try. Okay, I can see mangoes is in. I can see raspberries is not there. Would like to add. No, I don't want to add. The sheet has been updated. This is all clear. Raspberries is not in. Mangoes is still in. Okay, so that is adding message boxes to our existing inventory sheet macro to add interaction with the user. We're able to ask them questions and have a macro take a different course depending on that. Just bear in mind there are other buttons as well as yes, no. You've got all your classic OK, cancels, etc. As well. Later on in this course, we're going to start looking at user forms, where if you're not quite happy with a standard message box, which you've got to be honest, most of the time most people are more than happy with that, we can look at user forms where we can provide a lot more customization to them than what a standard message box will allow. As for us right now though, next up are input boxes. Hello and welcome to this lesson on using input boxes for interacting with a user. So we looked at message boxes in the previous lesson, and we saw how we can use message boxes to provide buttons of our choice, and we can use it to capture the user's decision. So they can say yes, for example, we can capture that and take a different course of action on it. If they click no, we can do something else, and so on. Now, input boxes are typically used to capture text entries. They can be used to capture like Boolean and numeric and date entries, and even cell references entered by user. But typically they're used to capture string or kind of text entries. And we're going to see a couple of examples of what input boxes can be used for here. Starting off with just capturing a name entered by the user and displaying it in cell B3. Quite a simple example. That's just to demonstrate the syntax of input boxes. So let me get into the code window and we'll get going straight off with it. And I'm going to immediately put range b3.value, something we've done a lot in this course, maybe not b3, but you know, assigning to cells. So equals, we're assigning to a cell, and we're going for the input box. I have to be very careful when I type that. I normally type in out box. Not sure what's going on with me there. That's my issue, not yours. But let's put an opening bracket. And notice it's very similar to the message box in the questions it asks us. The only mandatory one is prompt. And that is exactly the same as the message box. It's the text displayed within the box. So I'm going to put please enter a name as a string. Then I'm going to put a comma. So it asks for the title. So I'm going to put name please. So the title, you know, what displays along the top of the input box, like we saw with a message box in a previous video. Comma. Now default, we haven't done that as yet. Now default is the default text that's going to be displayed in this input box. So I'm going to, in a string, put enter name here. So I can demonstrate what this does. And we've been asked more questions like linking to help files and positioning it on the window and stuff like this. But that's all we're happy with. I'm going to put a closing parentheses, and we have ourselves an input box that's going to assign whatever we type to B3. So let's run this procedure. There is the input box. Title along the top, prompts in the middle there, and that is our default text. It's highlighted so I can type over the top. Personally, I don't think I'd bother with that right there. Bit unnecessary maybe. But it's great for maybe when a user has to put a date in and you want to display like today's date as default. so it maybe aids the user and speeds up what they do. There's probably better ways of capturing date entries. We'll look at user forms later in this course and stuff. There's bound to be better ways, but it works. For now, let's just type in here Mickey Mouse, click OK, and no surprise, if I look at the sheet, Mickey Mouse's name is in B3. Okay, let's delete that. Then pop back to the code window. I just want to quickly demonstrate it without default there, because I personally would not have bothered with that if I was doing this for real. But I wanted to show an example of what it does, and I'll play that. And I'm sure you could expect this coming, but I just wanted to show that it would show blank and your cursor would be flashing there as the alternative. I can now type in Minnie Mouse. Gives me an opportunity not to leave her out. She'll not be happy with me. And no surprise, but I've got to check it. Minnie Mouse is in there. Brilliant. Back to the code. Okay, so this is great. Now you might have noticed though that there were OK cancel buttons within that input box. And hopefully you did, because I was clicking OK. But what if the user clicked cancel? We should, include some code to cater for that, really. And, we spoke about error handling on this course, so we can put in error handling as a scenario, as a way around that. But what I wanted to demonstrate is the way the input box is at the moment. If somebody hits cancel, it should bring back an empty string. And rather than assign it immediately to the range, we should maybe assign to a variable first, so that we can test it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change, well, first of all I should create a variable. So dim name entered as string. And then I'm going to change this range b3.value to name entered. So I've got a variable called name entered that captures string entries, and name entered is assigned it by the input box. Okay, so now let's test it. If name entered equals, and I'm going to ask if it equals empty, because if the user clicks cancel, then the string will be empty. If name entered equals nothing, then display a message box to the user saying you did not enter a name, and then I'm going to put a title, no name. So just reminding ourselves different ways that we can write these message boxes and input boxes, different ways we write the code. Else we want to assign to B3 dot value equals name entered, and if. Okay, let's give this a go. So what I want to do is use my F8 key to step through this. I want to demonstrate what happens here. So when I press F8, in it goes. I can see name entered immediately at the bottom is an empty string. So it comes in, it displays the message to us, the input box. I cancel the box, and the string remains empty. So then it performs the test, displays a message to me, and just continues on its way doing nothing. So that's just an example of how we could test. As we've seen in previous lessons on error handling, there are multiple ways I could perform tests and deal with these examples, and they will differ depending on how I'm going about it. But that's a typical example there, where we use input boxes to capture text. If the user hits cancel, there is no text, therefore it provides a simple way of us testing what is in there. Right, I'm going to comment out some of this code, and what I want to do is show another example of the use of input boxes. So I'll just comment this because I'll leave this at the end for download this code. What we're going to look at next is on this sheet we have this example of a kind of currency conversion where I want to convert pounds into US dollars. So we're going to have a formula in cell C6. Now what this is an example of is using the input box method as opposed to the input box function. They look slightly different. They're extremely similar because they're both input boxes, but slightly different. And what the input box method will allow us to do is validate the type of data, which a general input box function we've been using so far, which is far more common, I should say, does not give us a potential to do that. If I just quickly put an input box back in for a moment, this, right at the end of the questions, they say as string. So everything gets captured as a string. What we're going to do instead here is I want to put range, I can't remember what it is. I'm going to put C7 in there, and I'm just going to check that. What have we got? C6. I've not got the greatest memory in the world. C6, range C6.value equals range must be B6.value. So B6 is where the pounds is at the moment. There's 10 pounds written in there. Great British pound. Got some sterling in there. C6 is where we want the US dollar conversion to be. So what I'm going to do is multiply that by whatever the user types in. So because exchange rates change quite frequently, it's just a simple little example. I want a user to type in the rate. Yeah, it might not even be US dollars, whatever it is, and it will perform this formula for them. Right, so we need a input box, but I'm going to put application.inputBox. So instead of using the input box function, I've used the input box method of the application object. And notice the slight differences. Prompt has string. Didn't say that before, just said prompt. It said has string on the end, which it doesn't anymore. And I've got this extra argument called type. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to answer this prompt. So in speech marks I'm going to say please enter the exchange rate. And then let me follow that onto another line. Space underscore, a line continuation character. There it is. And then I'm going to put a comma to move out of that. And I'm going to write type. So I'm kind of mixing up the ways that I write this. But rather than putting a load of commas, I want to use the type argument. And there are, I think, 8 or 9 different types of data we can capture in the input box. Now I'm going to provide a little table of these within the lesson. So you can see this. What I want to do is capture number, which is number 1. So I'm going to ensure that it equals number 1. So this is going to validate the type of data. So I'm going to put a closing bracket. It seems quite happy with that. And I'm going to run this code. So when it runs, this is the input box method. So it looks slightly different to how it was. You know, the OK cancel buttons are up here, now they're down here. Looks a little bit different. But we've still got our title. And we've got this prompt. And now I can type in like 1.6 for example, which I believe is the exchange rate for US dollars from pounds. So that should display about £16. I'll click OK. And if I check this out, I've got $16 there. I said £16, no, $16, obviously. $16. So it even brings it in this accounting format, which I didn't let sell beforehand. Really, that wasn't the input box that did that. That was me formatting cells. But if I delete that for a moment and go back here, if I play this again, The brilliance of this is that if I typed in Alan, if I typed in my name, does exchange rate my name? It will say no, that number is not valid. So that is that type argument. We cannot do that with our input box function. You could do it by creating other if statements and testing it, but this with the input box method is built in. And some of the other options, which I won't worry about demonstrating now, are to capture cell references and Boolean values as well. So it can be very useful. And string values, you can probably guess. So it can be very, very useful. Here we're using it to capture numbers, and it is providing a degree of validation for me. Say, look, that is not a number. But if I type in 1.6, it should now be happy to go ahead again for me and perform the formula. Which, because I've got a formula there, is obviously ultra important that it is numeric data as well. So really, really useful type argument that you get with the input box method. So we saw a couple of examples of the input box there, allowing us to capture kind of typed data from a user, whereas message boxes in the previous lesson are there to provide buttons and capture user selection in that way. Two ways of interacting with a user. Next up, we're going to look at something you'll be very familiar with from using Excel or computers in general really, which is using dialog boxes, existing Excel dialog boxes in our user interaction.